Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Never Say Never podcast, where we share the stories of extraordinary students who have overcome unique challenges on their path to success. We hope these stories might encourage you to do the same in your own struggles. I'm Noah Miller, and I have with me Unisha. She is an international student that came from Nepal, specifically Kathmandu, here in Loris, and she's going to tell us a little bit about what her journey here was like. So why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and give us a little background on you?
Hi, I'm Unisha. I'm originally from Nepal. I came here at 2018 fall, and then right now I'm studying engineering. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
What made you want to do engineering?
Well, all the things since my childhood, I always loved flying the kites, and then that made me think about the flying cars and the airplanes and the other, the space vehicles, and that made me interested toward the engineering.
That's interesting. So one thing I was curious about is when you first came from Nepal to here, I know in Nepal, the current population is somewhere around, I think it's over 1 million. And then here in Dubuque, it's just about over 50,000. Mm-hmm. Was that adjustment to coming to a place that had such a smaller population, was that difficult or interesting? What was that like?
When I came here for the first time at Dubuque, especially me being from the capital city of Kathmandu, it's very populated out there, and every time there are people all around the places, but then when I came here and I feel like, well, where are the peoples? There are no peoples. I cannot see peoples out here. Yeah, that was kind of I don't know what's going on, but at the same time, the people I met were very welcoming and friendly, because even though my place where I am from was populated, but people does not use to talk to you. It's we don't care about each other. But here people do care. At least they are very friendly and welcoming. So, at the beginning it was pretty hard not seeing people around me, but then, I'm used to it right now.
Right. Was the quiet difficult to deal with? I know for some people I've met from bigger cities, at first if they go to somewhere with less people and it's more quiet, sometimes they have trouble sleeping or it just is difficult to adjust. Was that a challenge for you when you came?
For summer, we don't have the summer vacation or something back home, but I know it's a big deal here. About I don't think so. The population or that had made affected my life, not the population stuff. Yeah, there are some other things that affected my life very much, but not the population.
What were those other things?
I would say cultural shock, maybe missing home, and then missing food, and then kind of something like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can imagine being in a place that's so different from where you grew up would definitely not be easy. What were some of the most challenging things about that for you?
Okay, so when I came here for the first time, the most challenging for me was getting adapted to the educational system. I came here as an student. So my first priority was my education, but then my first semester I was just trying to adapt with the education system out there, because it's totally so different from where I'm used to it. So that was kind of a big challenge for me. I was not even comfortable talking to the professors or seeking help with the tutors, because that was totally different, especially coming from whole different country and then trying to seek help I could not even communicate with them. I would say that I had a communication barrier, and then that made me more, lag behind or fall behind in my education. But as the time passes, I get used to it.
What were some of the ways you overcame some of those issues?
The first thing I would say, I took the communication class because I thought that would be the best way for me to at least communicate with the people or know how to communicate with the people. So after I took that class, that helped me a lot, because most of the projects or the things we did was talking to the people and get to know them. Even though I was limited to certain things, but it made me forced me to talk to the people and then communicate with others. And then I realized, okay, not everything is normal and everything is in the same page. Like everyone is on the same page. Like even the people are, whoever is from here itself, they were having trouble communicating with people as well. When I realized that, and then it made me much more easier to talk to the people and then seek help from others.
Yeah, that definitely makes a huge difference. Definitely in my own life, I found that oftentimes you might think that people might not have very much in common, or people have more reasons to have an issue with each other than to not. But a lot of times when you start talking with people and you get past that language barrier, you find there is more in common, and most people seem to have good intentions at heart.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely a big thing for people to remember, is that a lot of times you are going to find more in common with people than you might think you will. And as far as the language barrier went, I mean, how challenging would you say that was in the beginning?
I would not say that was super challenging. The only thing was I was lacking confidence because I grew up learning English back home, so it was not a huge difference. Of course, it was difficult for me to understand the accent here because I was not used to that. But I would not say like it was a huge deal or I could not understand you at all or I need to learn or take the language classes. That was not the deal. So it was pretty much okay. It was just I was lacking the confidence and not being able to talk to somebody.
Yeah, it's not always easy to build that confidence right away. What would you say were the ways that you built that confidence up?
Once I started talking to my friends, like I had a roommate in my first semester, so I did not talk to her for a while because I was always afraid what she might judge me for my accent or she might judge me for not being able to communicate in a proper way. But then once I started talking to her, she introduced me to her friends, and then it was pretty much easier. Then once I get to know them, and then once I started talking to them, it was like, okay, it's not that hard. So after that, I built up my confidence, and then I started. Then for an international student, there was a project where you are supposed to like make a presentation and talk about your country. While I was doing that built up my confidence, and then I started from there.
When it comes to some of the cultural aspects of transitioning from one place to another, tell me a little bit about what that was like.
From my cultural aspect?
I guess to explain it in a different way, like what was unique or challenging about coming from where you were to coming here, and just like the difference in cultures and adapting to that?
Yeah, so I would say like there are always the pros and cons for everything. So the pros was that when I came here, I found that people are very open-minded from what I was used to it. So they talk about the relationships and stuff openly, but that's not common back home. So I do remember in my one of my classes, like one of my friends talked about her relationship, and I was super scared for her because that was not what I was used to it. So that was pretty much, I was like, okay, now I can't talk about my stuff with somebody without any being judged. That was like a pros. And then that's about cons. It's not a con, but for me it was, because coming from different culture, it made me difficult to adapt the environment here from the cultural aspect. So my religion does not allow me to eat certain things, but I can see everything in the cafeteria. So because of that, I fall sick, and then I was into bed rest for some of my days. So that was kind of like hard, but you'll get adapted to everything, I guess.
Yeah, I could imagine that wouldn't be easy. I know here in the United States, we can be limited sometimes in the foods we offer depending on where you go. I've definitely noticed that, especially in like some of the cafeterias here. Like for someone that might have a different diet, yeah, there are limited options. It's not easy.
Yeah.
How was that for you?
Yeah, it was very hard for me especially at the beginning, when I was totally like thrown to the very new places, and then was like totally miss out my home food. So when I came here for the first time, I was totally limited to only the fruits options because I'm lactose intolerant, and then I don't eat beef or pork, and then all I see in the cafeteria is something made up of beef or pork. So at the first weeks of my life, like the semester, I was limited to the fruits, And then I started getting sick. Then I think I went to the health center and then got a pass so that I can cook on my own. So I started cooking on my own after that.
Yeah, that definitely sounds tough. I mean,
Yeah.
during that time, like what kind of got you through those times when you were sick or struggling to figure out like, okay, what's the solution to this?
Yeah, I frequently used to go to the mental health, and I used to put my problems because I was confused. Like, I cannot eat these foods because I might be allergic because I've never tried. And then also I did not have got to try them. And also there were so many religion barriers to try them. So when I went to them, they came up with the solutions like, why don't you try on your own, like cook on your own and stuff. So I started cooking on my own, and then yeah, that's pretty much solved the problem.
Yeah, I definitely find that even though there's a lot of things that you can do on your own, I think being able to reach out to people always makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
I mean, I've definitely found in my own life that you can't always do everything on your own, especially with the mental health and reaching out to them. That's very important on this podcast. I like to stress that a lot because I think in this time now more than ever, I think that's become more important just with everything that's been happening in the world and just how many huge stressful events have happened one after the other. It's become incredibly important.
Yeah.
I had something and I lost it. Oh yeah, there it is. So when it comes to like the faith aspect, may I ask what your faith is?
Like a religion,
Yeah, religion.
Hinduism.
Yeah, I remember both through my conversations with you before this point and also through research, Hinduism was the major religion. Was that like a difficult thing to adapt to as far as changes when it came to coming from a place where Hinduism was dominant to here? I mean, we don't necessarily have like a stated main religion, but Christianity tends to be the one that a lot of people here lean towards. Was that difficult to adapt to, just the change in?
I mean, yeah, or like, yeah, it was because, when I was celebrating, like, we have our main festival, so I do remember celebrating my main festivals here in the States, and then we put the tika in our forehead. So I did that, and then I was roaming on campus, and then somebody called me and they were like, do you have undi in your forehead? And I'm like, no, that's a tika, and that's a religion aspect. So I would not say it was very hard or very difficult, but it was kind of like, I don't know, should I should I continue following my practice, or should I just try to adopt with the environment? But then also I got an opportunity last semester to go to the Minnesota with the Loras College Interfaith Group, where we talk about the different religion and their aspects. So I found like most of the religions have the same faith but in a different way. So that made me more comfortable.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with a lot of that. You do find that even though a lot of religions have very different maybe rules or certain ways of doing things, there usually is like a core belief in trying to do the most good that you can, or just trying to, it's difficult to put it into the right words, but trying to do the best that you can, or trying to do good for others. Again, like that thing we talked about not that long ago of when you look past a lot of the differences on the surface, a lot of people tend to have something in common. Whether it's something as simple as religion or just the food we eat, there's always at least something that we have in common. When it comes to, sorry, I have to think about how I want to phrase it. Oh yeah, sorry about that. I got it. So were you here like during, like when the pandemic kind of first came? Like how did you navigate that situation? Because I think for some of the students that were international, like they couldn't just go back home. Like how did you deal with that situation?
Yeah, like it was same for me. I couldn't go back home because of the COVID and everything. I just stayed on campus. Everything was online, so taking online classes, and especially I was like upgrading my classes and getting into the harder classes. That made me pretty much busy with the classes itself. So I would not say it was very hard for me. Of course, it was like kind of challenging, but yeah, I could not go back home. I think that's okay, but I was pretty much busy with my classes and daily work.
Right.
Yeah.
How did you feel about, not being able to get back home?
I mean, yeah, there was like when the first wave hit, I was super scared because tons of people were dying. So I'm like, I don't know, like maybe I could not meet my parents. So you never know what happens next. That made me super scared because I'm not allowed to leave the country. And then I'm not allowed to meet my family members. That was pretty much super hard for me. But at the same time, that is what it is. So I was like, I have no any other options to do. I'm pretty much stuck, but then that's my life for now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What helped you get through some of that fear and uncertainty?
Yeah, like I do know that my uncle got the COVID in the first hit, so that was kind of scary for me. But then I tried, like I always FaceTime with my parents like every single day. So trying to stay connected to them, trying to get all the news from the family members pretty much helped me. Okay, they're fine, they're doing good. Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely the same for me when I was going through it, just trying to keep in touch with as many people as you could.
Mm-hmm.
I was high risk because I have asthma, so I was home, I think, for about a year through the whole time. And it's not easy getting through online classes. You'd think it wouldn't be all that difficult, but at least for me personally, being taken out of that in-person environment made engagement a lot harder. I just didn't feel as connected to the people I was technically in class with.
Yeah.
Was that difficult for you?
Yeah, at first it was like directly I was always interacting with the professors during the in-person class, and out of online classes, like I tried to focus, but I would lose my focus in a second. So, and especially with the labs and stuff, the professor used to give us the values or the data, and then you have to solve it on your own. Like I'm like, I don't know, I'm totally lost, and I think it's fair to tell me that I'm pretty much like I'm lost in the class. Whatever I take during the online classes, I'm pretty much like, okay, maybe I'm not confident enough in those subjects even right now. So it's very like grateful right now we're having the in-person class and getting connected with the classmates and the professors. That's making much more easier than what we did in the online classes. That was very hard.
Yeah, it was unique for sure. It's
Yeah.
hard to even think of the right word for that experience, but it was something. What helped you kind of work through that experience?
I think like just being like communicating with the professors, that helped me. But as for the classmates, I did not know any of them. I was like, I don't know any of you people. Like I don't know, should I contact you people or should I seek help from you? So I preferred contacting my professors and then seeking help with them, going to their office hours. Even though it was online, at least you were getting some help. I think that helped me pretty much a lot.
Yeah, communication is incredibly important.
Yeah.
I've noticed, like I said before, you can definitely do plenty on your own, but there's some things where you do have to reach out to someone, I think. Because I've tried doing everything by myself, and I found that it doesn't really work out so well.
Yeah.
You definitely need to reach out to people. And to try to work on not being afraid to reach out to people either. Because like kind of you explained earlier about not feeling sure about reaching out to people when you first came. And then when you do, you find out people are usually more willing to help than you would have expected.
Yeah.
I think that's something I would stress for anybody listening, is that reaching out to people is often not as threatening as you think it will be. There will always at least be one person that wants to help, usually more than that. Usually a group of people, but yeah, reaching out to people is incredibly important. So when it comes to like traveling to and from here and back home, what was that experience like? Was that easy, difficult, in between?
It was my first time traveling outside the country, and also I traveled all alone. So at first I was super excited because that's all I wanted. I struggled. I studied to get the US visa so that I can come here and study. I think I was super excited at the first when I came here, but then dealing with all those barriers and then cultural shocks and then missing home, that was kind of hard, but overall it was like, okay, it's challenging, but I have to get through it. Yeah.
What helped you get through it the most, if you had to say one thing?
Making friends and spending time with them. I think that's very important because everybody in some way have the same kind of, I mean, I know even though people are from here itself, but they are from different states, that even they are coming here by living their parents and trying to build community on campus. So I think everybody are in the same page and trying to find or build a home here. So building friends and making friends and building a new connection made me like get through it.
Yeah, friends always make a huge difference.
Yeah.
I think just finding the right group of people to support you, regardless of what you're doing, makes a huge difference. I know for me it was the same thing when I first came here, coming from a different city even, like I felt a little alone, not really sure where to go, but then I found a good group of friends, and that like completely changed my outlook on being here and going to class and all of that. It definitely changes your perspective in a lot of ways. And, you know, like I've said before, like you've said before, making those connections isn't as difficult as you'd think it is.
Yeah.
So that's huge. While making friends and connections here, was that language barrier and also cultural barrier difficult at first, or did you find that easier?
It was difficult, like I would say super difficult. I always try to find an international people at first because I was like, okay, they're international, they might relate to me in some way. But then, yeah, first of all, I tried to make only the international friends, at least like prioritize them so that I knew that like they might have the same problem as I do. But then my friend, she was not an international, my roommate. Then when I talked to her, she helped me to get through the different places, like where I can eat my food, at least similar. So I think that was important, even though it was hard, but then it made me, like it gave me confidence that other people are willing to help you too. You just need to reach out to them and then be open to them. So at first it was difficult, but then once I knew that, then I was like, okay.
When it came to just the differences, like what stood out to you the most?
I'm sorry?
When it came to the differences like in culture and that, what stood out to you the most?
Cultural, I would say like, when it comes to cultural difference, I would say I would go for food. That was the most shocking for me. I mean, not shocking, but that was one thing I was having hard time to adopt. Beside that, everything was like, okay, like, we are getting through it, but the not being able to eat the proper diet made me really challenging, like made my journey really challenging.
I could definitely imagine. I know the diet that we have here is definitely a lot different than a lot of the world's diet. It's incredibly different. I mean, even I feel that sometimes now trying to kind of make my own diet and make healthier choices, a lot of restaurants here don't really help you out with that. They like to give huge portions, and there's a lot of fried foods, a lot of fatty foods, and if you're trying to go against that, it can be hard. I mean, even not even being from another place, that's hard for me, wanting to try to do something different.
Yeah.
It's definitely challenging. I think there's definitely a lot of ways to overcome it. What kind of helped you make that change and get the kind of foods you wanted to get?
What we did was like we started doing the international potluck night, so that from every culture we make the different food, and then we started sharing our food and views on it. So that was kind of like okay, and then interesting, and one of the very much, I think I would call it very nice thing that can be done on campus, which made us connected in one way or another, and then also helped many international people who was having trouble with their food issues. So that was definitely one thing that helped most of the international student to get through it, and then learning about the different foods. Yeah, that was kind of like okay, and then better solutions.
Yeah, it's very interesting how important food can actually be in daily life and in culture. I think I can't necessarily speak for everyone, but at least in my life, it's not something I would have thought of as much in the past of. I didn't really think about it being that important. It was just food. But after learning about it just from other cultures' way of preparing food and the way food can play a role in like social life, it's a lot more important than I would have guessed. In just, in like adapting to the different ways of having food and the ways people treat food, it's a lot more challenging than I would have guessed. There's a lot to it. And just how much of an impact it can have too, like having that potluck and being able to kind of share your own perspective on food and to see other people's perspectives. It's just very interesting to see how much of an impact that can actually make. I keep forgetting things today. I don't know what my problem is. Earlier you mentioned a bit about kind of how different the education system was.
Yeah.
Can you kind of explain what the differences were and kind of like what it was like adapting to the differences?
Okay, like when I passed out my high school, we never had the GPA system. We were in the percentile. So when I came here, I was really struggling to understand the GPA system or the grading system. I was like, oh my gosh, I do not understand this thing. Like, I don't know if I'm standing in the right place or do I need to struggle more, or am I falling behind? I could not like tell myself what's going on. And then another thing is like we are not used to the general education system. All we do is we are very major focused. So when I came here for the first time, they made me take the business class, and I'm like, I'm an engineering student, why am I taking the business class? So I'm like, I had so many questions, but later I realized I think it's very important to take the gen ed classes, because you never know, you might love another subject more than what you think you do. So it was kind of hard, but at the same time, a good options. And then getting used to the GPA was kind of challenging for me, but I kind of get used to it maybe after a year. It took me a year to understand the GPA system.
Was there anything in particular that helped you kind of understand it or just kind of get through the adjustment?
I was like just going through the syllabus where they have like certain, the grading systems, grading skills. So I used to go through it, but then again, it was different for different subjects. So I was like, I don't know, but at the same time, I kind of had an idea, okay, if I get this much in this subject, or maybe try to do all my homeworks and get the certain percentage through the homeworks, it might help me in overall GPA. So that's how I did it. But it was kind of challenging, I would say.
I could definitely imagine. I mean, even someone who's been in this education system their whole lives, even I would find myself wondering, okay, why am I taking this class when I'm like, I'm a media studies major and then I'm taking something in business or something in science. I'm like, okay, what am I doing this for? Yeah. And I've been in this system my whole life, and even I don't always get it. So yeah, it can be strange trying to understand all of that right away. I think the big thing there is just taking the time and having the patience to look into it and maybe do some research or ask questions and say, okay, why is this the way that it is? Yeah. And if you just keep at it for a while, you'll be able to understand it. I know, like in my own education, that was definitely the case where I wouldn't always understand something immediately, and then I'd have to kind of like look into it, ask questions. And that leads back to, I mean, what we've been saying so far is just being able to reach out to people makes a huge difference, regardless of how confused you might be or how you might feel. Reaching out always seems to make a big difference.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I gotta think. Was there anything else that I haven't mentioned or we haven't talked about just your experience here that was that stood out or was difficult?
Yeah, like I would say, like, not sometimes being an international student, we don't feel inclusive. In, like, I know we are a minority group, but I feel like we still do exist. You know what I mean? So sometimes people like Lower College have the family events, or you know, where the family comes and visit you people or watch you play games. At that time, I feel like we're just being excluded from whatever the event is happening out there. And then that, okay, I'm not trying to say that call my parents from back home, but I'm at least trying to tell, like, at least do something for an international student, because I think we are here to find our home. But if you guys kind of like exclude us, that makes our journey more hard. So that's one thing. That's pretty much one of the hardest thing here at the journey.
I could definitely imagine. I mean, I can't speak for the people that set up the events. I'm not in charge of any of that or even know them. But I would want to hope that it wasn't intentional. I would think it wouldn't be, because I know when you're dealing with cultural differences or just even the difference of how far away people are, it can be easy not to think about everybody's perspective and where they're coming from, especially because for a lot of those people, I mean, they're just one person or just a few people. I think it can be easy to forget that there's a lot of people that fall outside of kind of the general norms that we set up here. And when you fall outside of that, it can be difficult to kind of adjust to it or figure out, okay, well, if I can't do this event or I can't kind of totally fit in, you know, how do I manage that? It's not easy. I mean, even I kind of felt that way coming here, because I mean, this is a fairly sports-focused school. I think, at least from my perspective, it seems that way. And being someone with asthma that kind of can't do a lot of athletic things, and never really got interested in it either, it was definitely odd trying to fit in, like going to a lot of the different group events, hearing everybody talk about, oh, did you see the game? Or, oh, did you go to it? Or, oh, are you playing this sport? And I'm like, no, not doing any of that. No, not playing anything, not doing that. It became difficult to make connections at times because there were just things that I wasn't doing that everybody else was. It's not easy. I think, like we said earlier, what helped me a lot with that was just kind of doing the work to keep making connections until I finally met the people that I did have things in common with. And then after that, I felt more or less at home, and I didn't worry so much about not fitting in. I think if there's any big takeaway from that, it's just that if you just keep looking, you do eventually find people that you fall in with. Sometimes it might not happen right away, but it will eventually if you just keep at it. And it makes a huge difference. Was being far away from your family for as long as you were difficult? Because I'd imagine you don't get to see them as often.
It was difficult. Like, I did not realize until I went back home, and then for the second time and I came back, I'm like, okay, that's when it hit me hard, because at first it was like, that's all I wanted, to come to the US. And then it was like a win-win situation for me, because that's all I wanted. Like, I wanted to go far from the family, be independent, chase my dream. That was like, okay, I can do it. But then I went back this January, and then I was like, when I came back, that hit me super hard. I felt like I missed out a lot of things. I did not get a chance to see my siblings grow, And then I did not got a chance to see the development that was happening in my country. So when I came back, that hit me hard, and it was pretty much super difficult to see how my parents had different perspective about me after I moved out. So it was hard, and it's getting more harder, I would say, with the passing days.
I could imagine, because I mean, if you had to guess, I mean, how often do you get to see them, roughly?
I went back in 3 years, so it's like barely.
Yeah, that's definitely a long time to be away from family. Yeah, I mean, I honestly can't give a lot of advice or for that kind of thing. I haven't been away from family for that long. For other people that might be going through something similar, what would you say to them, or what helped you through that the most?
I would say just keep communicating with their parents, doesn't matter what. Just find a common time. I know, being an international, you have the time difference, so you have to deal with it, but I would say just find the common time, communicate with their parents. And I know sometimes the things get really hard and get tough on you, and then you don't want to talk to parents, but I don't think so that's an option. I feel like just communicate with them, tell about your problems, and they might come up with some solutions, but the key thing is communication. You have to do it.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, what you touched on, I think, is a really big thing of, even if you don't feel necessarily like reaching out to someone or talking to family, oftentimes if you just force yourself to do it anyway, they might actually have something really important to say or something that helps you.
Yeah.
I know I've definitely had the same experience with my own family, where there's been plenty of times where I kind of didn't want to share what I was going through or talk much about it. But if I did, I usually ended up finding a solution that I wouldn't have otherwise if I hadn't talked to them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's incredibly important. What did it feel like being away from home for that long and then coming back and just seeing all of the changes that happened while you were gone?
It was such a shock for me when I went back home after 3 years. I was like, okay, I did not imagine this to happen like this. People are being so board-minded, and then country is being super developed, and yet, but going back from US, I fell sick for I went there for a month, but I fell sick for a couple of weeks because of the environment. I was not trying to be I'm already adapted to that environment, but I know I grew up there, but the thing is not working for me there right now. So it was kind of difficult because the environment and the weather there was not suiting my body anymore. So it was kind of harsh truth for me to accept, but that is the fact, and then I have to go up with it. So, and also, even I know I had a very hard time to adjust with the food situation out here, but then when I went back, now I don't like any food out there. Oh gosh, now I'm kind of stuck, because now I don't know what I'm really comfortable with. I'm still more confused. I don't know which side I'm choosing anymore.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be incredibly difficult when you're, I guess the best way to put it is caught between two worlds, almost, where, you grew up for most of your life living one way and then adapted to a whole nother one, and then tried to go back.
Yeah.
And then find out you're not necessarily as at home as you would have been before you left. I can imagine that would be an incredibly confusing experience.
Yeah.
What helped you through that? Or I guess from the sound of it, you're not done going through that yet. What helps you with it?
I mean, I just stayed there for a month, honestly. So all I tried to do was whatever the food I used to eat here, try to copy this, pretty much try to make similar on my own, so that I do not distress my mom who's trying to make food for me, but at the same time also I know that I'm not being able to digest the food she's cooking for me. So I just tried cooking on my own, or I know my diet, so preparing for myself as my diet, and then trying to cope with the environment as per I need or as per my need, instead of listening to them and getting into the trouble. So that's what I did. I just put myself first, and then did the things.
Yeah, I can imagine that must have taken a lot of strength to kind of get through, because it's not an easy thing.
Yeah,
Especially,
I do remember my mom telling me that I don't know you anymore. I'm like, okay.
oh God, yeah, that would definitely be rough. I'm not sure what I would do if I was in the same position, to be honest. I would be so lost, I think, if that happened, especially if it's something like that. Just the environment where you used to live in, or the food, like, I don't know if I want to say being cut off from it, but not having the same relationship with it anymore would be a strange experience.
Yeah.
But I have kind of found, whether it's something maybe not necessarily the same as that, but when things change, if you just kind of push yourself through it, you eventually, I don't know if find a new normal is the best phrase for it, but that's the closest thing I could kind of think of.
Yeah.
You kind of find new ways to work through things. And because I know for me, it wasn't the same experience, but I want to say starting a year and a half ago, I started dealing with symptoms of major depressive disorder and anxiety, and it was a similar disorienting experience of, I was kind of cut off from a lot of the emotions I used to have, where I would go from like having connection with family and friends and enjoying hobbies and things to just kind of being blank and not really feeling very much. And it's not the same experience, but it's a similar thing of things that you were familiar with just suddenly kind of being changed.
Yeah.
And not feeling the same, and not knowing like how to deal with that. And I definitely found that just kind of pushing through that to get to a different place, I was able to find like a better normal, like a better way to work through it. Like, it's not easy to sum up in one sentence. It's complicated, but I can definitely relate to that feeling of being kind of taken out of your normal environment and then trying to figure out how to navigate a new one.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but whether it's being separated from your emotions or being separated from your home, I think if you just keep reaching out to people and you kind of do the work to figure out new ways of dealing with those issues, there's always a way through it, whether you think there will be or not. I've definitely found that that's true. Is there anything else you'd want to add, or just any words of advice or encouragement you'd have for anyone?
Yeah, for an international student, I know whenever you go back, you might face a lot of difficulties, and then you might feel like you don't belong anywhere. Like, you don't belong in your own country, and then, of course, not here. But the thing is, like, at the same time, you are developing the new identity. So I think you just move on and just go with the thing and build the identity that you love.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting thing. I'm glad you brought that up. When it comes to identity and having to kind of like, I don't know if I want to say change identities. I don't know if that sounds appropriate, but just when it comes to kind of finding a new identity or working with a few different ones, what was that like, dealing with that?
I felt like I did not realize that I was losing my own identity until I went back. When I went back, I'm like, okay, I'm totally changed. I was not just realizing that, but now I'm here with the old person. I feel like, yes, I am changed. I changed myself a lot without knowing. So I feel like I would not say like, I don't know, I just lost my identity in the process. But at the same time, I built a new one, which made me myself today. So I think that's okay and that's fair.
Yeah, it's I can imagine, I don't know if I want to say just difficult because that doesn't feel right, but just how unique that situation is.
Yeah.
To kind of have one identity most of your life and then kind of have this new one when you're in a different environment. Because I can imagine just coming from a completely different culture, you kind of have to figure out how to navigate, well, okay, what is my identity? What is my culture now after having been separated from one for so long? I can imagine how difficult that would have to be.
Yeah.
Was there anything in particular that kind of helped you figure that out?
No. To be honest, I did not even thought that I was changing or I was trying to change myself. I was not trying to change myself intentionally. It was just happening because of the environment where I was. So, and going back to the same old environment made me realize, and talking to the people out there made me realize, okay, I've been somewhat changed, but I think this is what it is. And then, I don't know, I'm like, I think it just depends on how long you stay in the same environment. I could probably get back to the same identity as before if I was living there for maybe longer time, but then after just staying for 1 month, I don't think so you can change a lot, or I don't think so it seems to be a big trouble because of that. So, yeah.
When you first noticed that kind of original, like, national identity wasn't the same or wasn't there anymore, like, how did that make you feel?
The first, I did not notice on my own. Like, my parents pointed out to me. I'm like,
Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to say, like when you went back.
Yeah, that was the harsh thing somebody told to me. I'm like, I don't feel like I'm changed. I don't feel like I lost my identity, but that's what I feel. But looking from the other perspective, not only many people told me that, okay, you are changed in one way or different. But I mean, that was hard, but at the same time, I know that it was all me who went through all those struggles and built myself. So you can point me out. Of course you can, being my parents or my guardian, you can point me out, but at the same time, you should also understand that it's all the struggle I've been through, and then it's all my hard work to build myself as me. So even though it was hard, but I guess I just accepted the hard truth, and I was like, okay, I'm changed, but this is me.
Yeah, no, that's all well said, for sure. I think, like, a way of looking at it is, like, regardless if you're an international student or if just anything else in your life has changed, no matter what it is, I think being able to look at what's happened, accept it, and say, well, there are positive things that I have now, regardless of what I might or might not have lost.
Yeah.
I think that helps. I know with some of my own issues that I talked about previously, it was a similar thing where I said, well, okay, there's things about me that have changed after struggling with mental health. There's things that aren't the same, but there's also still a lot of positive things that I can find now. There's things that I can say, well, this is me now, and these are the good things I still have.
Yeah.
It helps. I think dealing with change is really difficult, especially when it's internal changes in yourself. But I think just looking for those things that you do like about yourself now, those things that you could say, well, even though I might not be happy about everything that's changed, there are other good things that have come out of it. I think that's probably the biggest thing that helps when it comes to that.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. I appreciate all of you listening. There actually isn't an episode after this one. This is the last, so I don't know when I'll see you all again, but I appreciate all of you coming to listen. And thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.